to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And I got to tell you something. The gentleman on my show today, his band was named after a Monty Python sketch and in something from Monty Python. And it means a lot to me because when I was little, I grew up outside Philadelphia, and we would watch Channel 12 on PBS, and I would watch Monty Python with my dad and my brother, and we would watch Benny Hill, and that really gave me a different sense of comedy. And that's why years later I think I got into stand-up comedy, because I saw a whole different aspect of it. And the band is Todd the Wet Sprocket, and it's Glen Phillips. How you doing, Glen?
Hi, I'm doing good, thank you.
Now, were you guys all big fans? Because it's one of the coolest stories when you see it. But were you guys like we were big fans? Like if someone said Spam, we'd be like, oh yeah, Spam's, going crazy.
Yeah. Dean, the bass player, and I were probably the two biggest fans. Probably Todd, the guitarist, the least. Randy, somewhere in the middle. But we were big enough fans that we had, both Dean and I had the Contractual Obligation album that had the Rock Notes sketch on it that the name came from. So I guess that would, like, on the scale of Python fanaticism, it's at least in the above average category. But we had a gig, we needed a name, and we thought it would be hilarious to see that in print, and that we'd come up with something better for the next gig. And then a year passed, and the better name never materialized. So.
But everyone remembers it. I remember the first time seeing one of your videos. It's one of those things, like they always say marketing. My mom was a market research manager, and I would say, oh, that commercial sucks. She goes, well, what was it for? I'm like, I don't know. She goes, well, it wasn't good advertising. For you, though, everyone remembered the name because it was different. And looking back, I mean, are you happy with the decision when you look back? I mean, for your legacy, how do you feel about that?
I don't know. The only thing that really bothers me about it is that, like, getting made fun for it because it's a terrible band name misses the entire point that it's supposed to be a terrible band name. And it's just one of those things where it's like, if you've decided to do a certain thing and then people go, that's stupid, and you go, yeah, that's the idea. The conversation should kind of end there. It's like, yes, of course it is. Anything else that we don't know already? But at least it gets us on like a worst band names of all history list every single year. And once or twice, I remember Patton Oswalt did a thing on, like, back when it was harder to be a nerd, back kind of the pre-internet nerd days. And like, yeah, Monty Python. He name dropped us in there, which made us feel like, okay, yeah, we're legit at something. It wasn't necessarily it being cool, but it was at least it being true nerds from the era.
So. You talk about nerds. I was sort of nerdy growing up, and the whole nerd landscape changed when Big Bang Theory came out, and all of a sudden, like, everyone was like, oh my god, like, before it was okay, but then all of a sudden it was like chic to be a nerd.
Yeah, I mean, Big Bang Theory helped. I think it was Bill Gates being the richest man on the planet. And, it was Silicon Valley, and when nerds went from being who you beat up to who you hoped to get a job from, I think that was the big switch, right? And it's good. I mean, I come from a family of academics. I love nerds. I always approve of that. So, yeah, whether it was Big Bang Theory or anything, at some point nerds started ruling the world, but unfortunately they turned into the same kind of, narcissistic turds that I think every leadership class eventually becomes.
Now, you come from a family of academics.
And now we have Elon Musk. Ta-da.
Yeah, it is so funny, and you're right. Like, as I said, even like before Big Bang Theory, was Revenge of the Nerds, and then all of a sudden, but they stayed cool. And I've interviewed Timothy Busfield and Curtis Armstrong, so I was like, I related to them because everyone watched that movie. I'm at the age where they're huge, but it's a thing where people do shift, and it's amazing because most of the time you want to stay true to your roots. You want to sit there and go, like, I'm legally blind in one eye. So if I see someone with, like, I was at a bar one time, this guy had like a lazy eye. Well, I bonded with him. I'm like, hey, this is what we have in common. But it is weird when people change and all of a sudden they are, like, as you say, they're becoming what everything they were against.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and You see how it happens. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. It's and there I think is a kind of predictable arc to that. And I think people like to think whether they came out of finance or came out of science or came out of just a well-to-do family or political power, there is a tendency to, whatever, how can I say, whatever internal checks and balances you have that go, well, this seems like an unreasonable amount of like sway in the world. So maybe I deserve it. Maybe I'm special. Maybe I did something so great that I actually deserve this position I'm in because I am superior. And so, you can create a story of, the lineage of kings or, the Chinese emperor being a god or, or close to, right? They're divine. Like it just, you make these stories about the divine right of the kings, right? And, we've got similar things with people who have like insane amounts of power deciding that their superiority is what put them there. And it does take an intellectual capacity, right, to run a large company, to do these things, to invent things. But it doesn't take a high emotional IQ. It doesn't take a lot of compassion. It doesn't take a lot of long-term thinking for the good of all. Just making tons of money is a very particular skill, and some people get really good at that, but it means they're good at that.
Right.
And it doesn't mean they're good at anything else. And when people say like we should run the government like a business, I think like that's bad. Businesses are profit motivated. Governments aren't. Like you don't want to run a government like a business. You want to run it efficiently.
Exactly.
But you want to run it with some compassion and some forethought.
Well, earlier you mentioned you grew up with academics, and was that something that influenced you to stay in music, or did your parents want you to follow the academia trail? I mean, I always wonder, because people who are like accountants, and like when I got into performing, my parents were like, "Whoa, what is this?" But what was it like for you? Because you probably started at a young age, and your parents were probably like, were they saying, "No, we want you to be a college professor or a teacher or what?"
No, my mom really wanted me to follow an academic track, and I think, and some of that, I mean, she's the Jewish half of my family. I think some of that is I think there is an idea in Judaism that, you never know when they're going to come for you again. And so, your house, your savings, those things won't save you. The one thing you can take with you that they can't take away is your knowledge, So you get a degree, you educate yourself, you work hard. That's the one thing that, that they can't take away, right? And so, and I think that's just culturally embedded. So she always wanted me to have a degree, and I always wanted to go back to school, but we went on tour when I was 18. I, got in college early. I'd had 2 years under my belt, but I never went back. So, and she stopped asking. Literally, she would ask every time I saw her when I was going back to school until I gave her a gold record. So I think she decided that was my diploma, and I was okay from then on. But I appreciated her concern. My dad was a little more like, he was, physicist, but he was also, he's like a so-so saxophone player, and he was pretty supportive of me being in the arts. And, before I could drive, he would drive me to all my gigs and got to use his van. He was a little more into it. Wasn't so into rock music, but he definitely was okay with us making music.
What made you pick up the guitar? I mean, what made you start playing?
I mean, probably my brother. So both my brother and I, although my brother did manage to get a college degree, he went to Berkeley, like my parents. But my brother played drums, keyboards. He was like, do you remember Fame, that old movie?
Oh, yeah.
He was like Bruno Martinelli.
Okay.
Early on, he had like a Mac SE, the very early one. He was running Performer before it was Digital Performer, before it did, it was like early MIDI stuff, and he had drum machines and, Jupiter 6 and Jupiter 8 and Juno 60, I think. And, he was programming synths. He works for Chord now. He designs synthesizers. And he was, Bruno Martinelli's the best, like, if I was to compare him to someone in the movies, that was my brother. And so, he's a brilliant musician, and I really admired him, and he didn't play guitar, so I did.
So how does the band get together? I mean, because you guys, you got a break at a young age. I mean, it wasn't like you were, 30. It was like, as you said, you started working. But how did you start the band? What was the beginning of it?
Well, I mean, they were all seniors. I was a freshman at San Marcos High School in Santa Barbara. We were in theater and choir together, and Todd had one of those nice old green woody station wagons, and I was really lazy, and he lived, it turned out, a block from me, so I could beg for a ride after play practice and throw my bike in the back of his car and get a ride home. And he had like a really cool music collection. I'd been listening to a lot of like metal, like more, Rat and Ozzy Osbourne, Iron Maiden, Rush. That was kind of where my head was at. And he had, Husker Du and the Replacements and R.E.M. And so we just started writing songs together. I would have been 15 at the time. And so learned how to write songs together, eventually kind of got the lineup with Dean and Randy, and we were trying to find just as much as we wanted to find a cooler name, we were trying to find a cooler older singer, because I was very nerdy. And so I was the temporary singer and just started playing around town. And the main place we played didn't like paying for ASCAP or BMI, so you weren't allowed to play any covers. So opposite of most bands, we had to play full sets of original material from the very beginning, and so we just kept writing and writing. And even when we recorded, basically we had a friend and also early manager, Brad Knack, was working on a record, and he wanted 2 songs recorded, and he needed a backup band, and so he asked if we would be his backup band. And then our payment was we got to record 2 songs, and we just did it live in a house, and we're like, that was easy. So we did 8 more. It cost us $600, and that was Bread and Circus. That was our first record, just recorded live in a track tome onto a 16-track 2-inch tape machine.
Now, 15. What are you writing about? Because I know the guys are older, but you think back to when. It's hard to think back because I've never had kids. It's hard to think about when you're 15, or you're a freshman in high school. You're going through so many emotional things. It's you're falling in love and stuff like that. But how did you start structuring writing? How did you guys get that right at that young age?
I don't know. At the time I probably thought I was deep. Right now I think I was like a little maudlin and over dramatic, I guess. But the very first song on the first album is about a funeral. The first song on the second album is about schizophrenia. I liked heavy subjects, and I think maybe part of that was getting trained by Neil Peart. Those were the first lyrics I ever really listened to. I wanted to write about big things and big feelings, and I had a whole lot of feelings, and so they were a little heavy for the age. I don't think the early songs are particularly well written, but I was trying to do something that made me feel. So and I wasn't really interested once again, and I didn't really write songs about girls and getting drunk and I'm going to be young forever and the night is ours. I was much more, trying to negotiate, depression and insecurity and feeling very small in a large and uncontrollable world. So the songs tended more towards that. So
then after that album comes out, you guys actually, you got, is it you signed with Columbia and you re-recorded an album? What happened? You guys, you've stuck to your guns your whole career, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, for good and for ill. We recorded Bread and Circus, and then the next year, so that was when I was 16, I think, and then when I was, maybe that was 17, and then trying to remember when this would have happened. Either when I think I would have been 18 when we started on Pale. So 17 for Bread and Circus, 18 for Pale, and with Pale, we recorded it pretty much live in the studio again. Did that with Paul DeGray and Marvin Etzioni. Paul recorded it, Marvin produced it, and we spent $6,000 on that record, and we never got to put that out before we signed with Columbia. We talked to a bunch of labels. They all wanted us to take like the best songs off of the first two records and re-record them and do a real record. And we were like, we did these records. We want to make a debut, but we want to like put this out, tour, do the college circuit, like develop as a band, and then do another record. Columbia was the record company that was willing to do that. There were people offering us a lot of money. And Columbia was the one company that was just like gave us creative freedom, allowed the records to come out as they were, and allowed us to make the record we wanted when we did Fear.
Now, as someone when you're young, I mean, was it hard somewhat to turn down the money, because everyone thinks, oh, I want to make albums, and and I know you guys wanted to stand to your stick to your guns, but when someone's were the other companies offering more money than Columbia, or what was the?
Oh, significantly, but there's the strings attached with that, and I think our management was really well protective of us, Chris Blake and Brad. Like I think the thing for us is we had these two records done, and I went in with the assumption that we would have these records come out and then we'd have a story to tell our kids. Like, yeah, I went on tour for a couple of years and then I got dropped, because that's what happens mostly, right? And somehow my audio interface just decided to completely disconnect from my system, and I started getting the beach ball of death and couldn't get out of it. Sorry.
That's all right.
Where were we?
We were talking about when you look back, you want to see, working with, even the band gets dropped, that whole thing. So when you guys...
Oh, just as a kid, yeah, I certainly didn't expect I would be doing this now. My intent had been, before we got signed, I was like going to go, I wanted to teach high school. I figured I'd do arts and humanities, and I didn't feel like I had the ego or the thick skin to kind of put myself in public and be judged. So I was pretty ambivalent about the whole thing, and I liked making good music. I liked making art, but I didn't want the idea of the kind of exposure kind of freaked me out a little. And so my assumption had been it would be a fairly short career, but our attitude too, we had a little bit of, we didn't need to make, we were like young and had a little bit of a punk rock attitude of, we made these albums, they're fine as they are, and then we'll make the next album. We were excited to do our major label debut, but we didn't, I think MCA offered like $1 million. Like, we were getting like massive things, and, Sony, it was like, I think it was like, $40,000 and $60,000 or something, to license each of those records that was already done. And then with our records up until Coil, our advances were just recording funds. We weren't paying our rent from the record deal. Like, we paid rent from tour and publishing. And so we were trying to be the cheapest band on the label, with the idea that if we weren't costing them a ton of money, that they could afford to promote us and afford to let us do whatever the hell we wanted. And we figured, the 90s were weird that way too, because, there were all those bands that suddenly got popular that didn't want to be popular, like, that are on major labels. You think of Pearl Jam or, most of the grunge bands, right? All of a sudden they're these huge bands, but they're like, not going to play the single.
Right.
So, and we were a little like that. Like,
Well,
we didn't like that we got popular on top 40 radio, and that, it we wanted credibility, and there was just this weird line of what was credible and what wasn't. And I think one of the hardest things for us was when we became popular, uh, losing our indie cred. Was kind of a heartbreak for us.
isn't that weird? Like, bands, it's like, and I'll bring up a band. I just interviewed Dunstan Bruce from Chumbawamba, and they were this punk band. And then that song came out, and
Yeah.
like all their fans turned on them. And it's like, well, no, we didn't think this song would become a international success, played at soccer games. If you listen to our other stuff, it's still punk, and they were still acting punk. But it's amazing how people turn sometimes. You're like, oh, it's like the old thing, with movies. A person can do a great movie, writes a great movie, and then all of a sudden they get some offer to make some commercial thing, and they do it probably because they've been struggling a long time. People are like, oh, you sold out, and it's like, well, no, I didn't sell out. I took the opportunity to actually capitalize for a little bit because I've been busting my ass for 15 years.
And, you're not going to say no if the record company thinks they can get a hit on the radio, and you already made it. We didn't make music we weren't proud of, but it ended up in places that weren't the places that we thought we belonged in. And so it was awkward. But
what were some of those places? What were some of those that you thought?
Meaning like top 40 radio. Just, it was odd. We were, a successful pop band, at a time when we felt like we were coming out of this, cool, like post-punk college music tradition. And it was just an interesting time. And it was a pretty great time because, all the barriers at radio were coming down. It was kind of one of those brief moments between, I feel like there's, as happens in capitalism, like, things get really corrupt. There's a ton of payola. Laws get passed to break it up. There's a great openness. And we kind of popped out in one of those open moments before it, turned to Clear Channel. And, when, it was indie promo instead of payola. It's like there were all these ways that the companies kind of, worked around the regulation and figured out how to get their songs played. But that meant that we were on college radio and rock radio and the beginnings of alternative radio and top 40 radio all at the same time. And we had, especially considering how self-sabotaging I was about success, it was remarkable that we had any success at all. And once again, I think part of it is that we did good work and worked really hard. Toured a ton. We did 300 shows for the Fear album. But I think you can do good work and work very hard. And I know a lot of musicians who do great work and work very hard, and they just never had a break. Because whatever it is about the timing, the marketing, what else is out at the same time, the week they put their record out, like it can be any of those things. And, we got incredibly lucky. Considering how little business acumen we had, or I had in particular. I'm amazed we made it as far as we did.
So when Fear, you said you did 300 dates with that. In the beginning, are you excited because you're on the road and you're living, this, and then all of a sudden, does it start grinding on you? Because I know people don't understand. It's not all partying. You got to get up and go to radio stations. You got to go. You have to do this. You have to do that. I mean, what is it? What was it like you? And was it easier because you were younger?
Yes. I also met my first wife, right before. I think 3 months before we went on our first tour, which was a 3-month tour. And I'm really good at not being happy in the place I am. It's like, I want to go home, and then I go home, and I want to go on tour. And so I trained myself very well in the art of wanting to be somewhere else as a young person touring. So I wasn't a big partier. I mean, when we first started touring, I couldn't even go in the clubs we were playing. Some of the time I'd have to wait out in the van They'd walk me on stage, and then they'd walk me back to the van. So, but we were getting to travel. We got to see the world. The first two, major label records. I got to go to, we got to go to Europe. We got it was an amazing experience. But wasn't like a partying, sleeping around kind of experience. And so, but yeah, it was a really incredible way to start seeing the world, seeing mostly America, but and especially in the days before we had a hit, it wasn't weird. It's like that thing when you go and see your favorite indie band and you wait out by their van and you just talk, right? And you get to be a fan, but there's none of the weirdness that happens once you've been on TV. And so it started getting a lot weirder after that happened, which is normal. But also I stayed in Santa Barbara. I had my friends. I had my, first wife. I had my family. I started having kids when I was 25. So feel like I stayed grounded in life and never really bought into the circus of it all quite so much. So I don't know. It's the only life I've had that I can remember. So I don't know what to compare it to.
Well, no. Now, did you enjoy making videos? Because you guys made some videos. Well, what
no.
did you? Because a lot of people don't. Because you just sit around and I mean, they were part of back then music culture. I mean, people actually watched videos, and now you can make them for a lot cheaper and all that. But what was your experiences? Was it just the monotony, or what didn't you like about them?
Oh, what I didn't like about them was that, I mean, I think the one video I really liked was probably the Something's Always Wrong video, where we had a concept for it. It was funny. It was nuanced. I thought that was our best video by far. Unfortunately, it looked too much like the Home Shopping Network, so people didn't want to play it because they were afraid people would switch channels. That was at least what they said. But I thought that video was a ton of fun. And, mostly with videos, it's like we'd be on the road and we're talking to, the guy from the record company, and they're saying, well, we think this should be the next single. We need to make a video. So the person from the video department sends, 10 treatments. And then we go like, well, we got a day off in Wichita. Can we do it then? Like, you're just trying to find a day off. You're squeezing it in. You're walking in exhausted. And this is the thing everybody's going to judge you for. So the ton of stress, and you never know, how it's going to look like. It just, I don't know. They were these expensive, weird things, and we didn't, I think, take enough command of our look and feel. And so, since we weren't thinking ahead, like except with the Something's Always Wrong video, it would always just kind of catch us by surprise, and we would go like, let's go with that one, that'll work. And so just always felt a little awkward. And I didn't feel we were a great video band. We've never been a great visual band. It's just not our medium. And it's one of those things you're required to have that be part of your shtick now. So, oh well.
Now it's the 30th anniversary of Dulcinea. It came out May 22nd, I believe, actually, in '96. Now, was there pressure for you guys, even though you did things on your own, because you had some hits off of Fear? Did you feel pressure going into the studio to bring it up a level, or did the studio respect you enough that said, you know what, we're going to just let them go and do the work because that's how they work best?
Yeah, I mean, with Dulcinea, I think we still had that relationship with the company. We were still only taking an advance to pay for the recording of the record. And I think we felt really good about the material we'd written. I think we felt, because of those 300 shows, we felt like we knew who we were as a band. We had our sound, we just had it together at that time in a way where it's like we knew what we were up to. So it
it felt pretty natural going into that. And we, worked with Gavin McKillop before. We wanted to work with him again. We knew what we wanted to sound like. We had this manifesto of like, no big overdubs on this one. It's all going to be what we can do live. So that we had a confidence and a unity walking into it. And our A&R guy for that was Chuck Plotkin, who produced, Dylan and Springsteen. And it was great. Like when we came in with the mixes, when he was sitting down and listening to songs, he'd sit there with his glasses hanging off his ear, and he's just like, he's like, this is a wild stew. You could really take people on a lot of journeys with this. Like, there's a lot of emotional content. You really got to think, like, what's the emotional journey you want to bring people on? So that's like how it was with us in the record company on that record. It was great. You get Chuck Plotkin asking you about what your emotional waves are supposed to be. As opposed to anyone talking singles or whatever. It was great.
Now, when you finished it, were you happy with it? Like, did you ever walk away from a project and sit there and go, maybe that track's wrong? I mean, I'm sure it's anything because that stays forever, but when you got done, were you like, this is the best project we could have done?
I felt like with Dulcinea more than any other album we have done, that we had that feeling and had it as a group, like where we were happy about the songs, we were happy about the recording, we felt it sounded like us, and we were really, I think, on the same page in a more profound way than we've ever been. So, yeah, I think it was a high point as the band. I think New Constellation is probably our second best album. Maybe it's our best. I don't know. But they're both up there together. Dulcinea was a really special one for us.
What made it so special? Just the Chuck Plotnick or just...
Everything I'd said before. It's like the songs were on, we were on. We were, we've always had our ups and downs, but generally pretty unified. Generally, like, we're trying to work as a team. And yeah, there was also just, we were in the middle of, the band was everything at that moment. So we were also, I don't know. I just think, we weren't like splitting at the seams and needing to find our way back to what we were doing as a group. I think we were all in it together. It's more than we've ever been on any other project.
Now, it's pretty fascinating when you think about it. The album came out 30 years ago, and how much things have changed. Like, technology, everything. When you look back, and now when you now look back at that album, what are your thoughts? Like, do you ever listen to your music that you did in your younger ages, or do you just say no because you just want to grow or you don't want to hear it?
I don't go back much. I go back when I need to brush up on something. But I don't listen to our stuff for, pleasure. It's weird. I don't look backwards. I'm a writer. I'm a touring musician. I keep wanting to make music. I'll listen to something a lot right after it's recorded. But apart from that, I keep trying to move forward. So
now when the band broke up, disassembled, I mean, it was probably one thing was also you guys were together for a long time and you're living a lifestyle. I mean, it's like when you're married, I'm married, me and my wife will be in different rooms watching TV. And there you're constantly touring. Once you went on your own, how did you adjust to that? Because you've been associated with this band for a while, you've recorded with Wild, and all of a sudden you're out on your own. What were you trying to do? Were you going to change the directions of your music, or what did you want to do?
I mean, I'd hoped to continue that, trajectory that Todd had been on, and I completely missed the gap. I whatever you call it, the Rob Thomas gap, where you make the solo career work after the band. I did not cross. I just fell into the river and got dashed on the rocks. So, I mean, it was really hard for me. I couldn't get a record deal. I was unsignable. I was 28 years old, 27, 28. I had 2 kids, and I had no way I couldn't get a record deal. I was unsignable. I was incredibly depressed. went into a deep, many years long depression. Um, Club Largo in Santa Barbara, in Los Angeles, kind of saved my life. Getting to go there with all these other great artists who had also been dropped around the same time and couldn't get a record deal. Phillips and Amy Mann, and it's like all these amazing artists who were kind of on the outs. And you know, it was a really hard time, in all honesty. And I've never had like a breakthrough as a solo artist. Never had a single that took off, or had, I kind of had a huge career, and then I had to work from, it wasn't quite the bottom up, but there were years when I went on tour solo after Toad, and I remember people writing me letters just saying, you obviously you don't look like you want to be here. You should just stay home. I was so depressed, and like right around the turn of the century, Y2K, I had a total nervous breakdown, went on antidepressants for the first time, which kind of probably saved my life. And then I met Nickel Creek, before their first record came out. They came down and played with me at Largo, and, backed me up on 8 songs. And like their love of music and love of life and their curiosity and energy really shifted my trajectory. And I mean, I think between Largo and between Nickel Creek, like they completely saved my life. And I don't know what I would have done, how I would have, if I could have gone back to school, how I would, but I was pretty low. So that part was challenging. And when the band first got back together, it was terrible. It was awful. We did not get along at all. And there were a period of years where we would try to play a few shows, and it would just, everybody would like, yeah, never again. And we'd go away, and then we'd try it again. Just slowly we got back to, we matured enough and had enough years between the early times that we, managed to get together. And, once again, I feel like the New Constellation album was just a miracle, that we healed enough as a group, that we got together enough in a way that we were able to make actually a really good piece of art together.
Now, when you got back together, when you were going through the depression, did that affect your songwriting? I mean, did you, they said you looked like you didn't want to be there, and I'm sure, you may be writing stuff, but if you're depressed, you probably don't really think it's good, because it's you feel down about yourself. But what was when you were doing your solo stuff, were you happy with the output of work you're doing and the quality of it?
Yeah. I've always struggled with depression. It's like been a background in my life. I can go really dark, and a lot of my writing has dealt with that over the years. Even in the early stuff. So it's not like it was a stranger to me. But I think it was the first time in my life where I was completely overwhelmed by it. Because I also have an innate positivity. I love people. I love being alive. It's like none of us are just one thing. I am every bit as optimistic and playful and joyful as I am despondent and hopeless, right? It's like, and if you're familiar with, depression, you can get it. Some of the most depressed people I know are also the most creative, friendly, happy people, right? When they're not on the flip side. And so, depression was always a good motivator for writing. I'm an anxious depressive, meaning that I'm not like I can't get out of bed, gonna sleep all day. I'm more like a wake up at 3 a.m. with, stressed out about everything in the world. I'm a can't sleep kind of depressive.
I go through that too. I go through that where you wake up and you're like, oh my God, wait, what? This is going to happen. And it's a weird thing to deal with because, I just want to sleep. Sometimes just to go, wait, why? I want to sleep through the night. And then you sit there and you wake up, and then you sit there and you try to get back to sleep. And I always do the old, they say, count backwards from 50. That will help you go back to sleep. But I always get distracted at like 27 and go, oh, shit, I got to start over again. It is a weird thing to go through.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm able to write. I mean, writing for me is more a matter of, you know, can I stay in the habit of writing? It's more about that. The difficulty these days is more just distraction. It's, you know, these things and, you know, it's all the information coming at you like that to me is the biggest, you know, creative block. But I could write when I was sad. That was fine.
Now, New Constellation, you enjoy making that. So what made you guys mesh again? You said maturity. I mean, was it just something that you just grew up? I mean, what happens? Because you started so young, and I can't even fathom being the age where you couldn't go into a bar that you're performing. It's just something you don't hear of.
Mm-hmm. We had a lot to deal with, and we're not exactly. I am a kind of talk it all out kind of guy, and that's not what the band is. And so, I mean, for me, it's a lot of, there's a familial aspect to it where you're, you know, not saying, you're learning what topics you can talk about and what topics you can't and what to let go. And, you know, more than anything, learning to not expect to change people. Or, you know, that what you can change is your own reaction to stuff. You can't really change how other people are or how other people act. But you can set boundaries, but short of boundaries, you know, people are going to be who they are. And in families, we learn how to negotiate that, right? You learn the subjects to leave, the subjects to pick up, things that really need to be worked on. And there's that question of you want to be right or do you want to get along? And so I think we've all had our own, you know, journey, and there's stuff that's gotten a lot better, and I don't get why. I would love to know. I would love to sit with everybody and hash absolutely everything out, but I don't know if we'd still be together if we did that. And on the one hand, I can feel like, maybe we're just, you know, wimps and we're not, you know, we're too conflict averse. And then another part of me thinks like, well, if we were less conflict averse, you know, we might not be doing this together. And I'm grateful, you know, for our audience and for each other that we've been able to continue. Because it's, you know, it's been kind of a wild ride. You know, I don't know. I don't think I'd trade it for much else. But it's been really difficult, like hanging with the same people, especially people you're not really, like outside of our history together, the music we make, we don't necessarily have a deep amount in common we like to do together. And so that part's odd and sometimes really difficult.
That, you know, that is one of the hardest things. Like, I come from an artist background. You know, I was a touring comic, and my wife, her friends, when I go out, I sit there, we'll go out to dinner or out at a party. I'm like, I have nothing in common. And they're all nice, but I have nothing in common with these people. And you leave, and you're like, I would have rather like just sat home and played music. Yeah,
it's a strange. I mean, you know, I live 3 months out of my life on the road with Todd, and that's a lot. It's a lot of my life. It's a lot of my time. It's a lot of my energy, and you know, I miss my friends, my family, my life when I'm having the life with them. But it's a different kind of family, and it's a different kind of relationship. You know, some of my primary lessons in life seem to be about like letting enough be enough, letting what's in front of me be okay. Like, once again, not distracting myself, not always having to read an article or listen to a podcast or multitask in some way where my attention isn't just on where I am, right? And I miss that silence in my life. And when you get addicted to all the noise and all the distraction, you start thinking that somehow the silence is going to be a scary place to be, right? That if you get quiet enough, your demons will start popping up. And I usually find when I get quiet enough, it's really beatific. And so, but I forget that all the time. So, in that lesson of letting enough be enough, it's like, hey, I get to go play songs that I wrote, or co-wrote for people who want to hear them. I get to spread beauty around the world. I get to remind people to be more compassionate, and, to themselves and to others. And that's like a pretty great way to spend your life. My job is more to, enjoy that as much as possible than to nitpick. There's the poet Andrea Gibson has a thing on like, oh God, how does she say it? For all that we've been through, and all that's been sliced off of us or removed, it's like you're able to see the part that remains more than the part that's missing. And if that's not a good definition of love, I don't know what is, right? And but that's a practice, and still working on it, imperfectly every day. But that idea, trying to see what remains instead of what's missing, better way to look at the world.
Now, looking at the world, the tour is starting soon. Now you're going out with the Gin Blossoms. Or do you look for? I mean, for now at this point in your life, it must be great because you see families come to see it. Like people who grew up in the '90s listening to you, and now they have kids. As a musician, that must be great because I mean, if I was a musician, I saw a kid with like my concert shirt, and it wasn't one that you buy at Target. It was actually one you get somewhere. I mean, is that a great feeling? I mean, do you appreciate that when you're on stage and just sit there and go, God damn, this is just such a great feeling?
It's very cool, and it's been so great to have that kind of generational. The generational audience has been fantastic. It's been wonderful. Very happy.
Now,
I don't know what else to say. It's like I feel good that our music, for all the I don't know, over heaviness of the lyrics sometimes. If we'd been writing, once again, songs about getting drunk on Saturday night, I've seen the bands that have more of those songs. And like once you get in your 50s and 60s, it doesn't wear as well. And, we're still asking some of the same questions we were asking when we were kids about like, how do we fit in? What is belonging? What is life? What is this life thing? And so, and it's beautiful to see the generational part of it. Like, young people showing up, is like, they grew up listening to us. It's really cool.
Now, looking back at your career, what are a few things that make you proud? Like, when you look back, and it's something that you go, man, I've had talked to people who said, my art paid for my kids to go through college. That made them very proud. What are some things that have made you proud?
Well, I got to put my kids through college. I'm proud of that. There wasn't much left over, but I did get to put them through college. I'm proud that for as gone as I was, I managed to be, like when I was home, I think a really present father. That my kids all still talk to me and seem to like me, and I adore them. I'm proud of who they are. And I'm proud that, the music, once again, I haven't had much commercial success for, the band, moves along, but not many updrafts, right, in the last long while. But, the letters I get of, people playing songs I wrote in hospice or in, difficult times, that means a lot to me. Just having music that takes people to, an emotional edge and helps them through their difficulties. I used to have this attitude of I just make the music I want, man. I don't care where it goes. And I feel like music should be functional. It should, even if it just, makes you dance, great. If it makes you happy, great. If it helps you cry about something that you couldn't access otherwise, it finds like that secret spot that opens something up in you, absolutely great. The music's magical that way. It does the same thing for me. And that's the stuff I'm proud of, is just that we touched people and that's carried with them. At the end of the day, it's way better than being cool. So,
one last question. We found out what's made you proud. What is one or two highlights of your career that you sit there and go, wow? Like, was there a certain gig or you met someone that you thought, oh my God, I listened to this person when I was younger? What was like one or two highlights?
We got to play the March for Women's Lives on the Capitol Mall. It was amazing seeing whatever it was, about 1 million people out in front of the Capitol Mall. I don't know, the meeting the famous people, like I met Joni Mitchell. That was amazing. And I was just nervous and an idiot, but, I don't know. I think just to be able to be an artist and to get to meet and befriend other artists, there's too many to count. Some of my best friends, whether it's Jonathan Kingham, who plays with the band, or Garrison Starr, or the guys in Nickel Creek, or they're Amber Rhubarb, Natalia Zuckerman, Matt the Electrician, like so many just people, and the minds of creative people I love so much. And once again, they're kind of nerdy minds, right? They're like scientists. I think, my wife's favorite quote from Mary Oliver is, attention is the beginning of devotion. And, that there is a way in which artists pay attention and look at the world around them and reflect on it. And there is a delight in being and creating and sharing and remaining open that is a beautiful thing to experience and a really beautiful thing to be around. So I'm just, more than anything grateful for, I've met so many hundreds, if not thousands of people. And I walk out of that feeling so much faith in humanity. And, which can be hard if you look at the news. And I remember even, in my brief, post-divorce, dating thing, I didn't really do well at the apps. I went on 4 dates and was, it's nice people, but I wasn't in a hookup thing. I couldn't do the apps. But I remember having some brief text exchange, with this woman. She's like, I'm an empath and I feel everything. And it's just, people are terrible. They're all manipulative. I'm like, no, they're not. People are amazing. And we ended up having this kind of chat argument where I was going I'm so sorry you've been hurt so much and betrayed. It's awful, but I just can't agree with you here. People are astonishing. And I just feel lucky for that, for my friends in town, the work they do in the world, the amount of love they bring in, I don't know, my view of humanity, despite also seeing the terrible things that get done, I just see so many people I'm in awe of, and I feel so grateful for that. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. That's the perfect answer. See, that's the kind of stuff you want to end the show with. I want to thank you for coming. People, go see them on tour this summer. Go to the website, Toad the Sprocket. Find all their info. Go listen to Glen's solo work. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find 1,010 episodes there. Email me, Cooper, coopertalk.net. I'm on Twitter. It's at CooperTalk. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.